Hey, coming up next, you're going to get to see our interview with comic writer Ed Brisson. We talk a whole bunch of stuff, like how he got into comics, how he went from self-publishing to being one of the most well-known writers currently working. We talk about his upcoming projects, working on Silverhawks for Dynamite.
And at the very end, we talk about he wrote one of my all-time favorite characters. Turns out it's one of his all-time favorite characters. So stay tuned to the end. You don't want to miss this one.
Yeah. So we are here today with Ed Brisson, comic book writer extraordinaire, who's joining us from, where are you from again?
Halifax, Nova Scotia, up here in Canada.
Right, Canada, which for many Americans who couldn't find that on a map, I believe is Nova Scotia, yeah?
Yeah, we're up and just like slightly to the right of Maine.
Right.
Above and to the right.
You ever been there?
I've never been to Nova Scotia.
I've not been to Halifax, as a matter of fact.
Have you really?
Yeah, my whole family went. We went on a trip my daughter was 1, so about 24 years ago.
So you want to apologize to Ed now?
No, Halifax is beautiful. Halifax was, it's a very funny story. We went to Halifax, we went on a cruise, my wife, her whole entire family, and us, and my daughter was 1. And one day we got off the boat in Halifax, we were there for 2 days, and me and my brother and my father got lost. There was a bar right off the ship, and we were there for the entire day.
There's literally a bar on every corner here. Halifax loves to drink.
It was a good day, let's just say. So the reason we really have you on is you're going to be working on a property from the 1980s that we love. Silverhawks is coming to Dynamite Comics.
Correct, yeah.
So what can you tell us about that? I'm not sure there's much you can reveal because it's coming out soon, right? Next month?
Yeah, it's next week, I believe. Like
really?
a week and a day from the time we're recording this, January 29th, I think. So, so it's kind of, I grew up with Silverhawks. I was a big fan of Silverhawks. When Dynamite announced they were doing Thundercats, I immediately messaged Declan, who I've known for a long time. He's writing Thundercats, and asked him that as soon as there was word that they were going to do Silverhawks, because these are sister shows,
right? Sure.
Produced by the same company, to please let me know. And I kind of kept bugging him about it. My hope was that Thundercats would do well, which it really has, kind of blown the doors off.
Yeah.
And that would lead to them doing Silverhawks. And so, I kind of bugged him a little bit. And then Nate, the editor on Thundercats, had reached out to me about doing a one-shot called Thundercats Apex. And during that meeting where we discussed it, I kind of badgered him a little bit about Silverhawks. Within a week, he gave me the gig to write Silverhawks. So this is maybe the first time in my career that badgering people has led to me working on a book. But I'm a big fan of it.
That's good to hear.
We're sort of like taking it. We're using the cartoon as a basis, but we're modernizing a little bit, updating a little bit. One thing, I grew up, I love the show, but one thing I would say the show maybe didn't excel at was like really giving these characters a backstory, like a full backstory, really fleshing out who the characters are. And it wasn't about that at the time. Really, it was an adventure of a week sort of type show. So that wasn't necessarily the purview. It wasn't really a common thing back then to really build out who these characters were. So we're spending a little bit more time with the series. I'm working with George Capodias as the artist. We're working together to sort of flesh out the characters a little bit more, give them more history. In the show, the show starts with Monstar breaking out of prison. Stargazer, gets a clearance to put together the Silverhawks team and to go out and fight Monstar. I think in the first episode we get about a 2-minute scene where each Silverhawk is briefly introduced.
Right. Yeah.
And that's it. That's all the backstory we get. So for us in the comic, we are starting at the same point. Monstar breaks out of prison. But we're going to slowly bring the team together. So we bring them together 1 or 2 at a time.
Yeah.
We want to show who these people were before they became Silverhawks, what their life was like. We want to show how they were impacted either directly or indirectly by Monstar,
Mm-hmm.
and his sort of current reign of terror. We wanted to fill in a bit more about Stargazer, because in the cartoon there's talk of how Stargazer's the one who originally put Monstar in prison, and that they had some sort of crazy battle 150 years ago.
Right.
And so we're sort of filling in the blanks on that a little bit more. This is like mild spoiler territory, not really, but there is the implication later on in the series that there was sort of this like proto Silverhawks team before our Silverhawks.
Okay.
And that's something we're getting into right from the jump as well, that who these previous Silverhawks were, who with Stargazer took Monster down for the first time. So that's kind of like our jumping off point. That's sort of our mission statement, I guess, is really to flesh things out, really to kind of put our feet on the ground in a lot of the worlds that we maybe heard about in the show but never really got to see. So that's kind of like our mission statement.
How many issues?
Very excited about it. What's that?
How many issues?
It's ongoing.
Oh, great.
So unless something changes, let's hope that we can have these chats once a year or something like that.
That'd be great.
Yeah. But who knows? It's comics. It's tough to predict.
And when are you crossing over with Thundercats? Silverhawks Thundercats? Come on, we know it's coming.
Everyone's asking. I think Declan and I are very excited about the prospect. But I think the most important thing for us right now is to make sure that Silverhawks stands on its own, that it's its own book, it's got its feet under it, and is well established before we start doing that. We don't want to use a crossover as sort of a crutch to hold up either book. We want to make sure each book is kind of running on their own, running under their own steam, and then hopefully build up to that crossover.
I have no doubt it's going to be successful. This is comics right now, looking back to the 80s and the stuff that we loved growing up, seems to be the big push right now. We just talked to the creative team behind Herculoids also, so it's another one that's
nice.
It's it's appealing to us.
And the way that that Declan Chavi's approached Thundercats has been really interesting, because he took something that was, not to denigrate the memory of these cartoons, but a lot of them were just really commercials for toys.
They're childish.
So we didn't get a lot of like background and characters, like you said, with Silverhawks. So when I read the first few issues of Thundercats that he wrote, and I really liked the way he approached the characters. It was really, really interesting, and I'm glad to hear that you're approaching Silverhawks in a similar way. That you're going to kind of like develop these characters as real, sort of living, breathing entities, because it's one of those things that seem to have so much potential, and like it wasn't really fully explored in the past,
But you loved it as a kid.
So of course,
it was
of course.
Yeah, we loved it. I think, but as kids, we're different. We're a different type of consumer than we are today, and we have different expectations from stories. So, for me, that's the only way that it would be engaging for me is to really build out that world.
Yeah,
and that's something I enjoy doing, as well as taking like really good ideas that I think we had a million really great ideas in the show. And extrapolating and really kind of building on those and using them as a foundation to sort of build our world, rather than like tearing everything down and starting over. I think, the foundation's there. I don't want to do that. We're just trying to build something that I think feels very much in the spirit of the show. Shows how much we loved these characters growing up, but it maybe takes it in a slightly different approach.
A more adult approach to it.
Yeah,
and
for sure.
Also appeals to fans who loved the show back then, but possibly also grabs new fans.
That's a big part of why we wanted to go back and slowly put the team together, rather than just dropping the team issue 1, that they're here they are, because then that relies on you kind of knowing already. So if we can take our time and really show why there's a need for the Silverhawks, why each of these members wanted to join to Silverhawks, and who these characters are, then I think, yes, it makes it new reader friendly. And I think it's something that people who are a fan of the original show are going to get that same sort of flavor that they like, but there's more stuff for them to learn about these people that wasn't explored before.
That's great.
It goes on sale next Wednesday. Is that correct?
Yeah,
On the 29th. Yep.
yeah.
So
January
so
29th.
most people will
Is that
see,
Wednesday? Is that right?
yes,
Yeah.
the 29th is when
All right.
this will be airing on Tuesday.
All right,
The day
perfect.
before.
I'll edit it as quickly as possible. So if you're watching this, go out tomorrow to your local comic shop and buy Silverhawks.
Get Silverhawks #1.
How many? You know, have any idea how many variant covers there are?
There's a lot of them.
Look.
I honestly don't know how many, but I know that there's quite a bit. I think around 30.
Buy everyone. Go out and buy every one of the 30 covers.
30. Wow.
30,
That's incredible.
30 covers. That's awesome.
Yeah.
I could be wrong on that. Like it could be like 15 or it could be, and I honestly should know the answer to this and I apologize.
How we look right now while we're talking.
Now, I want to jump back a little bit, if you don't mind.
No problem.
Your first series was called Murder Book, and that was a self-published
Yeah.
series that eventually got picked up by Dark Horse. So,
Correct.
just for anybody out there who might be, self-publishing or independent creator, how did you get Murder Book from self-published to Dark Horse? How does that happen?
So it was just like a little bit of luck and serendipity and just a bit of like having this thing that I could just hand over. Like I'd actually been self-publishing. So Murder Book, when the first one would have come out is I'm really kind of dating myself here. The first self-published one came out in 2010. Holy crap, that's 15 years ago now.
Wow.
At that point, I had already been self-publishing stuff, primarily that I wrote, I drew, I lettered, I colored, I did everything for 16 years.
But you had your own company at one point, right?
Yeah. Very briefly, I had a small publishing company. It was it wasn't. It was very, very small, like run out of my apartment kind of
New
thing.
Reliable Press. That was named, correct?
That's right. Yes. Yeah. Nobody ever brings it up. No one seems to know. But I ran a company called New Reliable Press for a few years. Mostly did like anthologies. We had an anthology series called You Ain't No Dancer. I published Simon Roy's first book, which is called Yon's Atomic Heart, which later got reprinted by
That's how you got your start.
Image.
Right? Your publishing company. How you got
book.
How you got your start.
I was self-publishing even before that because I think I started New Reliable Press in 2004, and it only went 4 or 5 years before I kind of gave up. But then I do occasionally roll it back out as so I did a Kickstarter at the beginning of pandemic where I did a new Murder Book graphic novella, and I used New Reliable Press as sort of the publishing, the self-publishing imprint. So it's a thing that still exists when you need it. Very rarely things come
out of your
and
back pocket when you need to.
and it's just me now. I'm just publishing myself now rather as opposed to publishing other people. But I started self-publishing like right out of high school. I just I really wanted to draw comics. That was my big thing. And I started writing because I didn't know any writers. And so I started doing, my first thing was like a really bad Spawn ripoff sort of thing back in 1994. And then for the longest time, for almost 10 years, I did a self-published autobiographical comic called Sob Story that was just kind of like, some navel-gazy stuff about my own life.
Sure.
And those I used to just print at a local photocopy shop and, fold them over, staple them. I had a long arm stapler, and I would just sell them through like the record shops and the local comic shops on a commission. And I would just carry them around in my backpack and I would like sell them to people if I ran into them and talking. And like really poor business acumen back then, because the comics cost me 53 cents, 52 or 53 cents each to print.
Yeah.
And I sold them for 50 cents each. So I was taking a loss on every book that I sold. But for me, I was just, this is kind of like very early days of the internet. So there's not like web comics. And I just wanted to get things into people's hands. I just wanted them to read it. Yeah. And if I could have given it away, I maybe would have done that. But my thought process back then was that if people slapped down 2 quarters for it, then they would probably read it. Whereas if it was a free publication, they wouldn't. And like my friends and I was very big into like zine scene back then. Like my friends and I did a lot of zines. At one point, we actually bought our own photocopier for like very little money, and it was worth about what we paid for it. It didn't last very long, but yeah. So I did that for years, and then 2010, I stopped drawing. I realized that like even though I'd only started writing because I didn't know writers and I needed something to draw.
Yeah.
Over the years, the writing is the part that I fell in love with. I thought I loved drawing. I thought I loved doing art and creating art.
Yeah.
And I more and more I found it really, really frustrating and limiting for, I think probably a big part of that's like my skill set, where I was at and what kind of stories I want to tell. And that, whereas I found the writing a lot more liberating and a lot more satisfying. And so I decided in 2010 I'm just going to focus on the writing. Yeah. I was living in Vancouver at the time. I knew a bunch of comic artists because I was, there was a comic scene, and I knew, there was a bunch of us that hung out all the time. So Simon Roy was a good friend. Like as mentioned, I previously published him, and so he drew the first couple murder book things. I just started doing these. My plan was my philosophy behind Murder Book was that I really wanted to, after 16 years of doing this and paying for it myself, I wanted someone else to pay me, but I wanted them to pay me to do stuff I wanted to do. It was like I didn't want to compromise what I wanted to do, and I always loved crime. I always wanted to do crime. My style doesn't fit crime. Like I have a very cartoony sort of style. It's more in line with like a Peter Bagg or Chester Brown or something like that. Yeah. And I wanted, I always wanted to do crime, but I never thought my style fit. So I decided I was just going to do crime. I was just going to self-publish myself. I would do 5 to 10 page stories. With an artist, we would co-own the thing. Like each individual murder book story is co-owned by me and the artist, right? So if one gets optioned, which has happened in the past, like we split that that fee. Anyway, but part of it was like I wanted to kind of get hired. I wanted people to publish me or whatever. And I thought with 5 to 10 page stories, it was a good way to give like bite-sized stories to, like, if I ran into an editor or whatever, that they could read while they're sitting there drinking a coffee. It wasn't going to be a thing. No editor wants to read a typed script, right? Like that. That's what they do for their job all day. They don't, and so they don't want to read some amateur type script, from someone trying to break in. So I thought if I could do fully complete comics and just hand it off to them, I might have some luck. Which is a good theory. But I do have like some pretty intense problems with like anxiety. So when I was younger, I would go to, when I was trying to do this, I would go to shows, and I was lettering on the side back then as well. And so I'd letter for like Oni, for a bit. I'd letter for a bunch of image guys. But when I would go to shows, if there were editors there, even if they were editors that I had worked with as a letterer, I had so much trouble going up to them, talking to them, to give them a comic. Thankfully, like, some would come up and chat with me, and then they saw I wrote as well. And they're like, oh, cool, I want to check this out, which was great. But, so that was a big problem for me. But, like, these I'm going back and forth here a bit. I apologize. No, it's fine. With these comics, one of the things I made sure to do when I was producing them is I would put them online for free for people to read. And full, so if I had a 10-page story, I'd put all 10 pages, and I'd do it so you could just scroll down rather than having to click page to page. Okay. And then I would still print them and sell them at shows, because my philosophy was that I think that when you're an independent creator, if people like what you're doing, they want to support you. Yeah. Right. So there is, I think, a philosophy that some people have, that if you put your stuff up online for free, nobody's going to pay for it if they see it just show. And my experience, that is absolutely not true. Right. If they see it online for free and they really like it, they want a physical copy, they'll buy it from you. And like, I was selling my books for $4 a piece, so it was not like, a huge investment. Yeah. And I think there are some people who will put their stuff up on free and up online, and they'll give like a page or two for free and paywall the rest of it.
Yeah.
Which if you're a pro and you have a following, that's cool. But if you're trying to build a following, I think the most important thing is just getting your voice out there.
Yeah.
And for me, when I started Murder Book, like I said, I was doing this, and there was one day, I don't remember exactly how this happened. It was Twitter. This was 2010, 2011. And I think it was Andy Diggle was just like, hey, I'm looking for some interesting stuff to read. And somebody linked him to Murder Book, and then he reposted it.
Oh, nice.
He's like, hey, this is great. You guys should read this. And then all of a sudden, it was just like a virus. It's like so many different people were reposting it. It was on like forums and stuff like that. So it just kind of caught on, and
that's
like
great.
My server crashed because at one point, there was just so much traffic that was unexpected. But like through that's actually how I first met Declan. This was like again 2010, 2011. So he hadn't even started working for Marvel yet.
Right.
I think he was working on 28 Days Later at Boom, if I recall. But like I met a bunch of other creators through that, and it's kind of the first time that my name, as a writer sort of started to get out there. But that couldn't have happened if I'd paywalled.
Right. Yeah.
The story, right?
Right.
And again, like I said, I think if you're just trying to break in, or if you want to get a publishing deal or whatever, that sort of like access to your work is almost important, that you can put that out there and editors can read it, or even just the public at large can read it and they like it, and it's a word of mouth type of thing. I think if you're starting out and you paywall the thing, you're not gonna, unless like you're a huge hit or an anomaly,
right?
You're not gonna make more than like pizza money, right? Like,
right, yeah.
It's almost not worth it. I think the value you get from just having it out there so people can see it is much more than a pepperoni pizza once every 2 months or whatever.
It seemed to have really hit you because you're doing a lot now.
Yeah, you're working.
Yeah, and it was great. I got a lot of attention, and it was through that sort of attention is how I first got like Dark Horse. Somebody brought a Dark Horse editor over and introduced them at a show I was at, and that's how the Murder Book collection sort of happened. But like it was through those Murder Book issues that I got my first Marvel work. I've told the story like a million times, but like the 10-cent tour version of it is I was at C2E2 in 2013, packing up, and I had 3 copies of Murder Book left, and I didn't want to take them back with me. So on my way out the door, I just kind of handed them to 3 different people I saw. I was just like, hey, you want to read a free crime comic book? And I didn't know at the time that one of the 3 people I handed it to was a Marvel editor who read it, liked it, and then contacted me to do a couple issues of Secret Avengers back in 2013. The Murder Book collection that Dark Horse then put out in 2015 was directly led to me getting work at DC on Batman and Robin Eternal, because an editor had read it, liked it, passed it along to the editor there. And then that collection again, so I did the Secret Avengers in 2013, but I didn't really work again with Marvel for a few years. And it was that Murder Book collection that Axel Alonso had come across in 2016, almost a year after it came out. And he really liked it, and kind of just walked in and demanded that I was put on a book, which is what kickstarted my career.
Well, that's awesome.
I'd had a couple false starts up until that point, but that's the thing that really kind of, I think, put me over.
But that means that
so just get your stuff out there.
No, and go to convention. You have to network at conventions
out there. Yeah.
Yeah, you go to conventions. Networking is it's almost like a dirty word. It's like, because I don't like to go. I'm not going there.
You're not soliciting.
I'm not going there with the express purpose of meeting editors and rubbing elbows. For me, I like going to conventions. I like meeting other creators. And I think the thing is, if you can sort of meet with other creators and build a community, that community tends to sort of like feed off of each other in a good way, like in a collaborative way. You're almost pushing each other.
You're building each other up.
exactly. And when I started out, a bunch of the creators that I was sort of hanging around at the same time, we all sort of started to get attention at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And, it would just like, because we were just pushing each other so hard to sort of improve our craft that, yeah, I think that is more important than going and trying to meet editors or whatever. Is just meeting other creators, finding your group, finding your crew, and sort of, building that community.
And see, that's funny because we've done a lot of interviews over the last year, and everyone has a community, a group of writers that or artists that they are always bouncing stuff off of and being bounced off of, and and we've talked to people as far as Australia, England, all over the world. We've talked to different writers, and they say the same thing basically.
Yeah, is that their communities are really what makes everything possible.
And they usually meet in bars or
Yeah, we always meet in bars. So I think we're all just a bunch of socially awkward people who need some sort of social lubricant to
that would explain it.
I like
but go ahead, sorry.
I'm sorry. I once saw an interview with Brian Michael Bendis, and he talked about how he's got this little community in Portland of people that he knows, like a few different creators. And he said that they would force themselves to have dinner parties at least once a month, or they would all just end up sitting in their houses drinking water and playing PlayStation by themselves.
So, and that's is a thing that I find is real. Like when I lived in Vancouver, I first moved to Vancouver in the late 90s. And part of why I moved there is I'd heard there was a good comics community. I lived in a smaller town, Kelowna, where it was me and two friends who hung around and we liked making comics. But like the idea of an actual community of like, a dozen or so people was just like this dream to me. So I moved to Vancouver, and of course, like the year that I moved, that sort of group of people had drifted apart. And I was there for a few years and never really found it. And then at one point I'm like, I'm just going to try and make it. And so I started a thing called the Vancouver Comic Jam in 2004. Okay. And it was exactly that. Once a month we meet. We like a comic jam, you should draw like one panel, you pass it down to the next person, they add a panel. But that's really like just the pretense to kind of get you through the door. It's really just about like hanging out, meeting people, and we would have, it's still going. I'm not in Vancouver anymore. A friend of mine took over running it when I left, but it's just over 20 years now that thing's been going.
Oh, that's amazing.
Every third Saturday. I think they moved it to Friday now. But and I started something similar here in Halifax as well about a year ago because I've been here for a few years and missed that monthly sort of meetup. So we have there's not enough comic artists and such here to do a similar thing. So, but we do have like a meetup where it's like, comic creators and just people who are like sort of interested in comics. We just hang out, have a few drinks. It's really good. It's amazing for meeting people. And forging, like the Vancouver Comic Jam, there's like actually a whole small publishing company that came out of the jam. Like they're all people who met there and then formed this.
I was going to
called Cloudscape Comics.
Yeah, I was going to ask if they've ever put any of the jams online.
So people always want to do that. Like we'll put them up on like a blog or something like that. Yeah. People always want to like publish them, but the reality is they're not good, right? They're like just a lot of people who are just drinking and drawing.
Yeah, but that's gotta be still fun to look at,
I think they're fun to be part of, right? But some of them, I don't think they hold up to the scrutiny of Morning Light.
Oh, like so many other things. Don't hold up to the scrutiny of Morning Light. That's good. So, can I ask? We always ask everybody this. Do you remember the comic book that made you as a kid think, I want to be in comics? Or
I remember my first comics, the ones that made me want to be a comic book creator.
Or like the comic book that you read and you were like, oh, this is my thing. Like, I love this.
Okay, well, the first comic that I read, it's actually a mini-series event, I guess, that really messed me up. It really sort of changed the way I thought about what comics could be, and sort of and forced me to like dig deeper into like what other books were out there that were like that.
Yeah.
Was Craven's Last Hunt.
Oh, it's a great story.
Yeah. Obsessed with that story when it was coming out. It was so dark. It was so unlike anything I'd read. Mm-hmm. And like I know a lot of people have like Watchmen as their thing, and Watchmen is a great series. This is not knocking it, but like for me, it was Craven's Last Hunt. It's just was so bleak and in a way that I'd never seen, you know, and the ending was a thing where like I remember reading it, and I was pretty young and just being like, yeah, they can't do that, can they? Like I was so blown away, pun not intended. Yeah. But like that, it messed me up in a way that was very intriguing, very exciting to me. Mm-hmm. Like it really made me feel some things that I had not, you know, necessarily felt, because usually comics were like very exciting and stuff like that, but it made me feel like I don't know, it was like this itch I wanted to have scratched again, you know. And so I started kind of digging into looking for more stuff that was similar, that was kind of a little bit darker. I think the first thing where like I wanted to become a comic artist, the first time where it really kind of clicked with me was when Todd McFarlane like rose to prominence. Yeah. You know, it wasn't too long for me, I think, after Craven's Last Hunt, like a couple of years that he really sort of
sure.
But you know, when I was younger, I kind of absorbed comics, but didn't really I didn't really pay attention to artists or writers. Like you know, I knew that there were people making the books. Sure. But it wasn't like where I really hyper focused on one creator over another. I was just absorbing comics like almost indiscriminately. I would just buy and read stuff, you know.
How did you get
it was like
back then?
When it started buying, it was like through a used bookstore, the 10 cent bins that they had, and then I had a pull list at a couple stores here. Unicorn Comics was one, which is still around. It's called Worlds Collide now. I've done a few signings there over the years. And there was another store called New Books, that GNU Books, that I bought my comics from for a little bit because my sister had dance classes next door to the store, and like, it was one of those things where like, I don't know, thinking back on it makes no sense because I was a latchkey kid, right? But for some reason, if my mom wasn't working and she was home, she didn't trust us home alone. Or like if she's working a 24-hour shift, it didn't matter, right? Like, but if she was off, like she would drag us everywhere with her. So I remember we'd have to wait for my sister in her friggin' ballet classes. And I would just go to New Books and just buy stuff. And I had a pull list there. I was cheating. I had 2 stores going on at one point when I was a kid. But yeah, but Todd McFarlane, I remember coming across his stuff. And the big thing for me was he was a Canadian, and he was and he was just blowing up. And I later found out that John Byrne was also Canadian. John Byrne was like just slightly, like he was very big during my time, but just kind of, I almost just kind of missed him when I first started reading comics, so I was not as aware. But Todd McFarlane, just being a Canadian guy, he's from BC. I moved to BC when I was 14. Mm-hmm. I was obsessed. With Todd McFarlane for years. I wanted to be Todd McFarlane, and he was the first time where I was like, oh, like this guy doesn't live in New York. In my head, you had to live in New York and you had to like work out of the Marvel offices.
Right. Yeah. Right.
I'm like, this guy lived like in Calgary, and now he lives on some, for a while he's living on some island in BC. Mm-hmm. I'm like, oh, like this is a thing that we could do. Like I could just not have to move to the United States. I can do this, and that kind of just set me off. I was convinced for a long time that I would be a comic book artist. I went to high school. From high school into fine arts in university. Yeah. If you look at my old high school yearbook, it's like literally going to be a comic book artist.
Right. Yeah.
Was my future goal. I went to fine arts to try and like train. There was no interest in fine arts at that time in comics.
Yeah.
So it was kind of not the best experience. But yeah, Todd McFarlane, just like I worshipped that dude for years. And then when Image started and they were doing all their own writing, that's kind of where I was like, oh, I don't have to find a writer. I can just do the stuff myself.
Right.
Have you ever met him?
So I've not really. I was at a convention in Vancouver, I want to say 6 or 7 years ago. And I was in an elevator with my wife going back to her room. And Todd McFarlane and his father stepped in. And I'm like pretty even keel. If you don't know me really well,
yeah,
I think I'm good for like I don't get like super excited. You'll never see me like kind of bouncing off the walls or anything like that. So like I think my mood modulation is very minor, but my wife knows it and she can nail it every time. And we were just in that elevator and she turned to me and she's like, "What's wrong?" I'm like no. She's like, "What's going on?" I'm like, just wait till we get upstairs. She's like, "Something's wrong. Just tell me what's wrong." I'm like, all right now. And then like Tom McFarlane's dad turned around and was talking to my wife.
Oh my God.
They were having a conversation about something like that, but I just couldn't. Again, this is like I mentioned earlier the anxiety. I couldn't bring myself to be like, hey, And at that time, I'm working for Marvel. Like I'm a comics professional. Yeah. I feel like I can be like, hey, part of why I'm doing this is because I wanted to be you growing up. I was like, you were like my idol, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. And it's still one of those regrets I have to this day. I wish I'd said something, but that's my closest brush.
Really?
Oh.
You would think it could. You do quite a few conventions, right? Throughout the year, you're here and there.
I not as many as I used to, but yeah. But I've never really run into him.
Cross paths at least once at a.
I think I've only been to 2 or 3 that he's been at, and that was the only time where I've run into him. Like we were. Turns out he was actually. They put him up in the room across the hall from me, so we were actually like roommates practically. Our neighbors.
But you still didn't go over
up to chicken shit. I can't. Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny. I had a similar reaction when I found out. I grew up on Long Island, suburb New York, and I had a similar reaction when I was a teenager and I found out that Chris Claremont lived like 2 or 3 towns away from me, and he lived in the same town like an aunt and uncle of mine lived in.
Right.
And I wasn't gonna like look for his house or anything, but that same experience of like, oh, there's a Long Island guy who does this. I know he was born in England and all that other stuff, but. The fact that he lived on Long Island, and that the suburb that I grew up in was like, oh, it's like such a interesting thing to find out these people you admire are like people,
Yes,
they're not some sort of they're not some sort of like unreachable, height,
See, I grew up in New York, and I just assumed everyone that wrote comics was from New York. So I was like, hey, everyone's
right.
You're gonna run into them on the street. There they are.
See, we assume that across the world, like
you again.
Yeah.
Al Milgram, there you are again.
Yeah, again. Simonsons, I can't walk out the door without tripping over them. Yeah.
I've actually only met one in my entire.
Really? They're very nice. I like them.
No, met one person in New York.
Oh, right.
Who was a con.
I thought you never met the Simonsons.
No, I have not.
Because they're everywhere.
Yeah.
So where do we want to go from there?
I have questions for you. Like I said earlier, you wrote a bunch of things that over the last couple of years I've actually loved. Wrote some of my favorite characters: Old Man Logan, Dead Man Logan, Iron Fist. You wrote. I have a question about writing Predator.
Okay.
Right. So you wrote the Predator, the first series at Marvel, right?
I've written 3 so far. Yeah.
And the last, what was it? The last Hunt.
Mm-hmm.
How does that work with Marvel and with 20th Century Fox? When you get on a title like that, do you have you have to follow a certain script from both of them? You can't do certain things, or no, you're free to do whatever you want.
Do they have a Bible follow or
yes. So I'll take it in steps here.
Sure.
But no, they don't give me a script. So what had happened is when I was first approached, which was actually early days of the pandemic,
Right.
I got a call to see if I'd be interested in writing. Or I had a call. It wasn't even to ask if I wanted it, but it was gauge my interest because they were working on getting the rights.
Right.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, I love Predator. I would love to write a Predator book. And I had actually from my so I saw Predator at a drive-in theater in the 80s when it came out.
Yeah.
Me too.
I was a big fan. Back in elementary school, I used to it wasn't called fan fiction back then, but I guess like it's something that was fan fiction.
Sure.
I'm a big horror film guy. I love horror movies, and so I used to write a ton of like stories about Freddy or Mike Myers or Cujo. I was weirdly obsessed with for a while.
Yeah.
But like all the like sort of big 80s slasher characters. Right. And when Predator came out, I had written these like short like Predator stories that when they asked me if I wanted to do Predator, I essentially dusted off this old idea that I had, which was about somebody in the future who was out hunting predators. Like it was just flipping it.
Yeah.
So rather than the predators being the thing, the predators are more the prey here because it's someone who's trained their entire lives to track and hunt and fight predators. So the germ of the story was like a thing that, from back then, obviously it's, the thing I wrote as a kid was pretty, but it was from the mind of a child.
Sure.
So it's definitely like updated and
so that's how you created that lead character that was hunting.
Yeah. Theta was kind of from the character was different in my original version. But that's essentially the genesis of it came from there. There were a lot of changes from this original idea I had, but the very kernel of that idea of somebody hunting predators through space came from this thing I did when I was a kid.
It was great.
Thanks, man.
Absolutely fantastic. And I'm a big superhero guy, so 99% of my collection is superhero stuff.
Right.
But I also love comic books based on movies that I love. Predator, Alien, Planet of the Apes was fantastic. And your stuff on Predator was it was like a continuation to me mentally of the movies and how I could see it going. Do you have any more planned? Because I know there's nothing.
There's nothing in the pipes right now with Marvel. I do have if they want to continue, I have some tracks laid out, some places I want to go.
Because they came out really hard, really hard and fast with the 20th Century Fox stuff, Planet of the Apes, Aliens, Predator, boom, boom, boom. And now it's like there hasn't been a Planet of the Apes in a while. They're only doing Alien Paradiso is the only one going on right now. So it's like, wait, I need more. What? Why?
Look, I'd love to do more as well. I don't know because as far as I know, they were fairly successful for them. So I'm not sure why the cool down, but that's above my pay grade. But you asked about the Bible.
Yeah.
The funny thing about the Bible was that there is a Bible. Mm-hmm. And I didn't know until I was on my third volume.
Oh.
Nobody had sent it to me because this is not to slight anyone, but early on there was a couple editorial shifts because of the pandemic.
Sure,
things were moving around, so there's a couple editorial shifts. So I suspect that everyone just assumed that one of the other editors had sent it to me. And so there was a couple times where I had a few things with 20th Century Fox where I'm like, I want to do this. And they're like, I don't know. It was a bit of back and forth. And to be clear, they were really great to work with. I've done licensed books in the past that have been just nightmare things. But 20th Century Fox is among one of the better ones.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it was in the third volume, there was something. Somebody sent me a note. They're like on page blah 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 of the Bible. Mm-hmm. I'm like, I don't know what this Bible is,
what?
And because of nothing I had done had sort of because I know the Predator universe enough, I think, and mm-hmm. part of why we went into the future is that we could kind of tell news stories without having to worry about some other continuity. Like it frees us a little bit. But I hadn't done anything to break anything, right? And so I think they just assumed I had the Bible because I was pulling in some other reference. And I had like a ton of reference that I was like, when we were working on series, I would send in a ton of reference that I'd culled from online. And I think they just assumed that I was taking from the Bible.
Right.
But yeah, it was, so yeah, there is a Bible. It's about 800 pages, I think.
Wow.
It's pretty hefty.
Yeah.
And it tells you the do's and don'ts, the things you cannot.
No, it's more like,
almost like continuity and character.
Yeah, it's more like continuity. So it has every character who's ever appeared
I would
in Predator, from the like films to the comics, right? So it's almost like a Marvel Universe style thing of all those characters.
Yeah,
it's got every Predator. It's got all the weaponry. It's got all the ships. It's got all the like sort of communication, all that sort of the planets.
They should put that out
and stuff. It's I mean it's like you can tell it's been put together by a bunch of different people. So it's not. Sure. I don't think I think it would need it would
need to be a
polish before it could be published. But
it keeps growing. The universe really keeps growing. So
yeah.
Did it include like the Dark Horse stuff or just from the movie?
Yeah, there were Dark Horse characters were in there as well. Yeah.
Oh wow.
Okay. So there's like characters from like Concrete Jungle and like.
Well, that's why, because I brought one of them in for the Last Hunt, which is actually I tried to bring in Dutch, but I was pretty sure they wouldn't let me do it. I was 100% right that they wouldn't let me do it.
They probably have to pay Schwarzenegger money.
Right.
Yeah.
But that's the same. That's why I think. Well, I think also because I was in the future and I had this idea, that people had been in stasis chambers. Right. And I think if we had brought Dutch into the future, then not that they're going to be beholden to the comics when they're making films, but it does sort of like throw up a bit of a roadblock, I think, to doing a film with Schwarzenegger that's not set in a...
and they might have to give Arnold money for the likeness rights, too.
Oh, yeah, probably. Yeah. Who knows,
Yeah.
See, everyone goes to that. No one talks about Predator 2 and how great Predator 2 is in the Predator scheme of things. Bring Danny Glover into the future. Biofreeze Danny Glover. Maria Conchita Alonso. Let her.
No. So, for the longest time, was the biggest Predator 2 defender. I love Predator 2. And there's a lot about it that I enjoy.
Oh,
but I think it's kind of fallen down to like, in Predator rankings for me, maybe fourth. The OG Predator for me is great. Prey is great. And then I like Predators a lot.
That was good. I thought that was much better than most people gave it credit for.
I think so too. I think there are two like missteps in there that I'm not crazy about. But if you kind of can look past those, I think it's a great film, and it adds in a way that some of the others don't.
I like Prey also. The last one I thought was really well.
Yeah, Prey was great. Prey was incredible.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to what they do next, actually.
Danny Glover's coming back. He's going to bring in the future.
Okay, you brought up horror films. I'm a big horror film fan.
Okay, cool.
You specifically mentioned Freddy.
Uh-huh.
I think Warner Brothers has the rights to Freddy right now. I think. I'd have to look it up because I did some research in Nightmare on Elm Street for an unrelated thing.
Right.
But, would you put together a pitch for DC and see if they want to put out a Freddy comic for Black Label? Because we've gone a long years with no Freddy comics.
That's true. But isn't there a Freddy show coming out? Am I wrong in that? Like,
yeah, isn't it going to be like? Yeah, it's going to be how
like
he
became. Series?
No, it's going to be how he became Freddy Krueger. It's him as a human, is it not? And how he gets chased, and I think it's that part. Him as not as the dream guy, as actually Freddy Krueger. That's
going to be a hard story to tell because
it's only going to be on one of the cable stations.
That's going to be a rough story because we all know where the story's going, and B, who are they going to get to play him if not Robert Englund? Like who else?
It's not going to be Robert Englund.
I don't know. All right, I'm sorry.
Skarsgård.
No, that's all right. It's all good.
He's a giant.
Yeah, I don't know. I've never really considered it.
Yeah.
I do have a book that will be coming out probably later this year. That's a creator-owned thing that is very much in the vein of the 80s slasher thing. Excellent. And kind of a really fun take on it.
Yeah.
It's an idea I've been working on for a couple of years. that I kind of pitched the idea of like doing like, let's do a slasher film as a comic, but we come in at like part 5. So like it's been going on for a while, and yeah, it's just a really fun idea that I hadn't been able to shake, and I just signed a contract on it. So hopefully later this year, very early 2026.
Oh, interesting. Who's it coming from? It's you, but
I can't. It's not been announced or anything yet, so I'm like, I can't say anything.
Thank you for not saying anything, because we've done a number of interviews where people will do this and then they'll go, "Ooh, you can't put that out there."
Yeah.
No, thank you for not saying anything.
Making editing easier
for me. Yeah. Also enjoyed your Batman Incorporated run, which was fantastic. Bringing all of those other Batmans from around the world into basically the modern universes and introduced the character to a lot of people. That was really well done. I wish I really appreciate it. But
yeah, me too.
Now I have to get to the one character that you've worked on that is one of my all-time favorite characters, and we had the creator of this character. It was one of our first interviews we've ever done on the show. You wrote Captain Canuck.
Yes. Yep.
We love Richard Conley here. He was
awesome.
One of the, to me, when me and you were communicating to get this interview done. I do most of the communication. I do people who I like, basically. Brian rarely ever says, get this guy on. I go for people who I love Richard Conley's run on Captain Canuck. When he said yes to me, I was like, oh my God, Brian, and I don't even know if Brian knew at the time who he was. Like, Richard Conley's coming on. He did Captain Canuck. I love the comic book. I love Captain Canuck, and he was amazing.
You can't see them right now, but back behind this wall that we were sitting behind, there's Captain Canuck action figures.
Every Captain Canuck,
I got mine up.
Everyone ever made, and he signed them for me.
Nice.
See?
Oh, you're gonna go get yours?
See?
I got mine over here. Just let the please don't drop. Oh my God, I almost dropped MODOK. Okay, yeah.
My
oh wow, you got Amigo.
Look out.
Whoa, okay. Keep talking. Ow. Ow.
Keep talking.
This is not set up.
Keep talking.
So I will say I have a Richard Conley story, if you guys will sort of like permit me for a moment.
Yeah, he's running around back here looking for Captain Canuck stuff.
Can you hear okay? Or I see
this is actually we are presently in Chad's basement.
Yeah, look at that.
Where he has all the stuff he collects.
Beautiful. I never managed to get that one.
He was at a convention at like maybe 20 minutes from my house, and he was selling these, and he was selling signed ones and not signed. And I love the character.
You're not even on camera.
Right.
We'll switch on. I love Captain Canuck since I was younger. I don't know why. I'm not a Canadian.
Right.
I thought the character was so cool that it was an independent character, and the way it was done. And it's been a fan obsession of mine for a long time. When I saw you wrote Captain Canuck, I was like, oh, you wrote Captain Canuck. I got to ask him about that. So when you wrote it, did you have any communication with Richard Conley? And
so yeah, I'm gonna like go back in time in a minute here, but like the Captain Canuck for me, that was one of the first comics I tried to get the entire run of when I was younger. I was really into it. It was because it's really weird's not the right word, but it's a lot different than
very different.
What you think it's going to be, right? It's got very sci-fi tones to it. So
and an independent inspiration. What he did on that comic book and how he did, and we had him on. That's what he explained to us. We were amazed at how he basically did it himself.
Yeah.
He did, and so I'm going to say something. I'm trying not to get choked up when I talk about it, but I was 18. I really wanted to get into comic books, and I did a thing that I'll beg other people never to do because I never should have done this. It worked out, but I never should have done this. Is I somehow got Richard Conley's phone number. This is before the internet.
Oh.
And I phoned him out of the blue. I'm just like, I want to be a comic creator. He just relaunched Captain Canuck for the second time, then the early 90s run. And I was like, do you have any advice? I'm a big Captain Canuck fan. I'm really excited that it's back. You're this big kind of Canadian institution. And honestly, he should have hung up the phone. I'm some kid
he's such a nice
calling him at his home, And instead, he talked to me on the phone for 2.5 hours.
He's such a nice
guy.
guy.
And he gave me advice, and he put me in touch with people, and he really like established for me, this idea of like being like a community-based person and helping other people in your community, but also just in the way, like I'm not a mean person, so I'm not going to treat people meanly, I don't think, but just a way to treat your readers and your fans.
Yeah.
And again, like I called him at his house. He should have hung up on me.
Mm-hmm.
And he was so kind and so generous with his time, and put me in touch with some other professionals working in the industry who also sort of gave me advice and such. Actually, weirdly enough, one of them is someone who doesn't work in the industry anymore, and who I have not spoken with in like almost 30 years, who just reached out to me a few days ago through email. Mm-hmm. He remembered Richard putting us in touch. So like, I hold like a special place in my heart always for Richard Conley.
He honestly, I think he's, if not our first or second interview, and he was just,
yes,
to me, it was like we've interviewed a lot of people since then, and a lot of like big names in the industry. He's my big one. Like, I had the guy who created Captain Talk on this show.
Yeah,
Awesome.
it's amazing.
And it was just, I mean, he was, and like you said, he was just such a nice guy. We just, was chatting with us and telling us the whole story. Now this one, I've had this for many years. There's a variant to this one.
Is it the new Captain Canuck variant, or
no? It's this one, but he has like a convention shirt on.
Oh, okay, right.
And it's almost impossible to find, so that's what I'm looking for.
All right.
In my crazy.
Yeah, I also have this. Sorry, I know we've turned this into show and tell.
That's fine. No.
Okay.
Have you seen this? It's the coin.
No.
Oh boy, here we go.
Sorry.
Deep breath.
It's from the Royal Canadian Mint.
Oh, see, we don't see that here. Then. Oh, that's awesome!
Wow, that's
coin.
nice.
What that is?
That's a metal coin.
Yeah, it's a $20 coin.
That is
fine silver.
Wow.
And when did that come out?
2018. So it's a few years now.
Okay.
Guess what's going to happen now? As soon as we're
interviews, new obsession.
Like finally.
So,
I have my questions.
You still have questions?
No, I have how we always end interviews with my like 3 questions.
Well, I want to ask one more question before we let you go.
We've taken up a lot of your time.
I noticed on your list that you've written some Stormwatch stories.
Yes.
Right. Now, Stormwatch was one of my favorite comics at one time. I really enjoyed like tons and tons and tons of it. Where do you see any of that going at this point? I've noticed like, are you going to be working on that again, or is that just like done?
No. So I did that like a year and a half ago, 2 years ago now. Yeah. And I think there was a plan to sort of relaunch the whole Wildstorm universe.
Yeah.
And so I did 6 issues, I think, within Brave and the Bold. It was sort of building to that, but for one reason or another, it never really all came together. So I haven't done anything for DC in about a year now. So like I like to mention, like I'm also right now working in video games, writing, cool. And I've been doing that for just over a year. So because of that, my comics output has sort of dropped because I'm 40 hours a week on the game.
There's a lot of there seems to be a lot of crossover with comic writing and video game writing.
I think it's very similar sort of muscles. There are definitely differences for sure, but it's similar sort of muscles that you're brain muscles that you're exercising on both.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's been about a year and a couple months now that I've been doing that. Okay. So unfortunately, I haven't really been in touch. The editor I used to work with at DC left, and because I was already in the game, I haven't really sort of pushed them or followed up with anyone.
Yeah, because I was a big fan of both Stormwatch and The Authority, and I noticed that the engineer is going to be in the new Superman movie, so I was hoping that would be like
maybe that'll kick things back off.
Yeah, maybe.
See.
All right, so you wanted to do your last question.
So usually at the end of an interview, I throw 3 questions at you. Quick rapid fire questions. I'm going to tailor one to you, but the other ones are the ones that are there. If there was any character you could work on, who would you want to work on?
So the character, my sort of like character I want to do a series or mini-series about before I die, before I'm done writing comics, is Speedball.
Okay.
I'm a big Speedball fan from back in the day.
New Warriors.
Even pre-New Warriors. Like I was the right age when they released like back in the late 80s, there was a real big push for Speedball. He was everywhere in advertising. They did go back. They were promising he was going to be the next Spider-Man.
Yeah.
And I was the right age to just be like, I want in on this. I want to be on the ground floor.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, I followed them through New Warriors and every sort of incarnation since then. But Speedball. I have a Speedball story that's like tucked away that I want to do. It's pretty much like if they tap me to do it, I'd be writing it tomorrow because it's all sort of laid out.
Good one. We haven't heard that one yet.
No.
Yeah, I think he's a great. He's a fun character, but I think there's a lot of like interesting stuff to do with this idea of kind of exactly what had happened, entering the scene with expectations that you're gonna be Spider-Man, right? And then it's 20 years later, and you're not, right? You're the guy signing photos at a convention, and the only people who come up to your table are just asking directions to the washroom, right? Like you're not even like a has been kind of. You're like a guy who just never made it.
It sounds like a great story too. Second question is there any artist that you would really like to work with that you haven't had a chance to yet?
So one of my favorite comics when I was younger was the Daredevil. It was the Ann Nocenti and John Romita Jr. era of that. And that was the first time I really noticed an artist. Like Todd McFarlane became a big favorite of mine was slightly after that. But that John Romita Jr. stuff was what really like kind of drew me in. I've been a big fan of his for years, and if I have like a bucket list artist, he's artist list, he's at the top of it for sure.
Awesome. Yeah. And my final question is, why a Red Sox hat?
Oh man,
really? He's in Canada. So how's he a Red Sox fan? He's Canadian.
This is lame, and I dread going out and people ask me about the Boston Red Sox.
Right. Oh yeah,
because I know shit about the Boston Red Sox.
Okay, yeah.
It's just a hat. I like the hat. I like the B. B's stand for Brisson.
That's perfect answer.
So yeah, I'm not a sports guy at all, and so I do like wearing baseball caps.
Right.
And it was just I got this for Christmas, and the B, like I said, just
it's just for your name. It has nothing.
Repurposing it.
Good.
Yeah.
That's great.
That's a good answer for 2 people. Thank you.
I don't care either way. I'm not really a baseball fan, but
so do you have any appearances coming up or anything you're going to be doing?
Any place people can
Yeah, so I don't have any immediate appearances. I'm doing a convention in August that hasn't been mentioned yet.
Okay.
I am in the process, because it's come out next week, I guess I could talk about, but I'm in the process of organizing a store signing here. I'll be doing a store signing here in Halifax for the release of Silverhawks on the 29th.
Nice.
At Cape and Cowl Comics, which is
good name.
If you're in Halifax, you know where it is. Beyond that, I have the show in August. There's a couple other things that I'm talking to right now, but I'm not committed to anything. Unfortunately, just with the job, because I'm there 40 hours a week, it's actually pretty difficult for me to get like a 4 days off over the course of a weekend.
Sure.
To go and do a convention.
So you're not doing the big two. You're not doing the big two this coming year.
I'm on the fence. I may do New York Comic Con.
Okay.
It's a fairly easy one for me to get down to. But it all sort of depends how my next couple months of work go, because things could be like, I could be in a pressure cooker at that point, and so I don't want to I'm trying desperately not to overcommit myself to things. And I don't know if there's something. I was doing a lot of conventions before the pandemic, and then the pandemic happened, and I had to stay home for 2 years.
Right.
And it might have turned me into a bit of a homebody. So we'll see. And now, like, I don't like my. There's a couple other factors or two. Like my daughter is a bit older now, so she's like 18.
Right.
She's in university. Who knows how much longer? Like before she's on her own.
Right.
So I'm not like, if I'm taking time off of work and going somewhere, it's generally going to be with family for the next couple of years.
Definitely understood.
Great reason.
Perfect reason.
Yeah. Well, listen, thank you so much for joining us today.
All right. Well, thanks for having me.
Yeah. You're welcome back anytime you want to promote something.
Yeah. If you got anything you want us to throw out there into the world, let us know.
We'll do. Yep.
Right away.
One last thing. We should, where could people find you online if they want to catch up on news on what you're doing and stuff?
Yeah. So you can find me on Twitter still, just at Ed Brisson.
Mm-hmm.
I'm on Instagram at Ed_Brisson.
Mm-hmm.
And there's another guy who's named Ed Brisson who got in there like 6 days before me and got no underscore. And it's only posted once in 12 years or 13 years.
Man.
But Twitter is kind of where my stuff is mostly, is that and Blue Sky. So I'm at Blue Sky at Ed Brisson .Blue Sky, whatever the thing is.
Okay.
But yeah, Instagram is mostly like me just posting about records I'm listening to, or photos of my cat or my dog or whatever. But those are main places. I have a website, edbrisson.com. That's usually where I will update when I'm doing conventions, and where I will sort of post try and post news. I have a newsletter you can subscribe to through there, which it's a very dusty newsletter right now. I don't put it out as often as I should, but I should be doing one soon. And that's primarily it, I think.
That's great.
Hopefully we'll see you down the road at maybe a convention or two. We'll be at Comic-Con. We go to that every year, and we're around. We're usually somewhere. You never know. But really, thank you for your time.
Awesome.
This was great.
Awesome.
Yeah,
I appreciate it.
Nice to meet a fellow Captain Canuck fan. Thank you.
You see how excited that was.
Yeah.
We both got excited. It wasn't just one.
Yeah, we're doing show and tell. It was great. I love it. I don't get to talk about Captain Canuck much or Richard Conley. So
I certainly don't.
But you should see what the rest of this little place looks like.
It looks like a lot.
It is.
When you walk behind, I thought that was a wall. I didn't realize there was more shelving behind.
That's just a shelving unit.
Just a shelf. There's more.
This is his basement.
This is my basement.
All right.
Inside my head, basically, you're in right now.
Oh boy.
All right.
Thank you for your time, Ed.
All right. Thanks,
We'll
guys.
chat again at some point. Take care of yourself, all right?
All right.
Thank you.
All right. See ya.